Hi everyone, welcome to Creative on a Bed. This is a new podcast that I'm starting. This is the first episode, and this podcast is supposed to be about creativity generally. Maybe not in the aspects of teaching and stuff like that, because I know this is something that a lot of people would like to see. Maybe teaching creativity. Oh yes, I believe that you can teach creativity, but I feel like this podcast is more about exploring the journey of creativity. More than anything, and also going through whatever is happening within a creative space at say any particular time. This episode, for example, I think I would just like go through my thought process about how AI is currently affecting creativity, or its effect on creativity generally right now. For whoever doesn't know me, or if you're meeting or seeing this for the first time, or you don't know who this is, my name is Dembidaya Johnson. I'm a multidisciplinary creative. What does that mean? And how does that even make any sense? So I started my creative journey about 8 years ago. And before that time, I would say I've been creative, but to become who I am today, everything started about 8 years ago. And in that time period, I've done a number of things. I've explored visual creative mediums to audio creative mediums. I've worked in production, that's audio production. I've worked in sound engineering, and on the visual side, I've worked and I still currently work as a photographer and a cinematographer. I'm currently trying to work to become a director. Currently, I direct several projects, several campaigns, and those campaigns are predominantly in fashion. But I want to be able to direct other projects that are in other spheres. And one of the things I'll be doing on this podcast is also sharing that journey with you as you come along. So this podcast is supposed to be a cozy place for creative exploration, inspiration, and basically creative talk generally. I generally know that I like to talk to people about things that I find fascinating, things that I find creative, and basically, that's one of the things I'll be doing on this podcast, and also exploring inspirations about things I find inspirational enough that I feel like other people will find value in. One of the goals of the podcast as well is also to be able to bring other people in, other people that work in the creative space, other people that I know that are creatives, to be able to really share that journey and know that people can see one or two things in terms of value from the conversations that we might have. And maybe the elephant in the room, why is this podcast Creative on a Bed? It's just as literally it's in the name. Literally, I'm a creative person. I'm sitting on a bed, and I hope to also get people who are creatives to sit on the bed with me and have creative conversations, or have basic conversations about their creativity and their process. Aside all of this, it's also not aside being literal and figurative, it's also that I believe that creativity sometimes comes from a place of maybe rest sometimes. Personally, I get some of my creative ideas when I'm most relaxed, when I'm in very relaxed situations, and I know that that's the same for a lot of people. Not everyone's creative process is like that. Some people thrive in chaos, but I personally believe that in a space where I have less things to worry about and I can focus, I become more creative. And that's the idea for Creative on the Bed. It's like you get the opportunity to hone in and focus into just a space. I mean, sometimes just hearing people talk about creativity in a very relaxed setting sparks a lot of things in my own mind, and I hope that will be the same for you. That's the idea of the podcast, and that's the idea of this introduction, to make you understand that, okay, in whatever you're doing in your day-to-day, just know that sometimes you just need that space where you can relax, where you can focus and hone in on the things that you already know, the things that you're exploring, and maybe together we can constantly push the limits of what creativity means. On many of the episodes that we'll be putting out, I'm trying as much as possible to keep it short and not be too lengthy for anyone to be able to watch. I believe that a lot of people have a lot of things that they're doing with their lives, and just a little dose of conversation, of tips, or anything that would just make you maybe refresh your mind, that it's like out of the regular programming that you go through every day. That's what the podcast is supposed to be. And today, as usual, which would be the usual custom going forward, is I'd like to share something today. In the past, say, year, one of the things that I've seen grown a lot is artificial intelligence. Everyone just says AI. I guess that's a very short way of saying it instead of going through the long syllables and everything. So AI for me has been one of the most eye-opening things. I remember when I was about 16, I was trying to find schools to go to, and at the time I wanted to apply to a university in London at the time, and I was sent their brochure. And in the brochure I saw a course, and I was like, oh, I would like to do this. But at the time, I to be honest, right now I can't even remember why I didn't go for the course. And the course was actually computer science with artificial intelligence. And it comes as a shocking thing to me, because then I just felt I liked that course because I never heard stuff like that. When I read the program, the program, what the program required of you, and I was like, oh, this will be interesting. No one around me does this. But it's funny how that has become like the main thing right now. I didn't think of it to be as big as it is right now, but it has become this big. And I know that AI has a lot of applications in other spheres, in other industry, but in the creative space right now, I think one of the biggest things is AI. For example, as a photographer, almost every photographer I know now uses AI in one form or the other, from helping in, if you use Photoshop as a photographer, you'll be able to see AI is already integrated into Photoshop, for example. And I'm sure that other Adobe applications would be integrated into, they will have AI integrated into them. I constantly use the voice enhance feature that Adobe has in their one of their programs, for example. And there are a ton of uses. Many of you might have heard of OpenAI, or maybe Midjourney. That honestly, there are just like a gazillion of them. And as much as they are, I feel like we are still at the beginning of what we probably can use it for. Now, as much as I believe that there is a future for AI and every creative has to learn how to use them, I'm trying to look at a different side today. One of the things I'm trying to look at is how some things cannot really be affected by AI yet. And I say yet because everyone can learn, and once you can learn, you can teach. And I feel like you can teach AI some things. But for now, I feel like these are the things that won't be affected by AI. So about 6 years ago, I was just finishing my youth service. And if you don't know what that means, youth service is something we do in Nigeria where it's like a year of, you just basically go into a service to your country for a full year. And at that time, I finished my service and I was looking for employment. And the first job I got was as a social media manager. And I think in about a month or two, they found that I could take pictures, and they slowly transitioned me into becoming a photojournalist at the time. And when I became a photojournalist with the company that I was working with at the time, it was, should I say, interesting, but I moved after about 6 months, so that sort of stopped. So I was just a photojournalist for about 6 months, and this is in one field that because of ethics and a number of other things, I've seen that AI hasn't really had much effect on that, should I say, genre of photography, because there are many ways that people use AI. And I'm sure that even in photojournalism, people will find a way to use AI. But current reporting, I found that it's really hard for you to use AI to enhance your photography, because it sort of goes against ethics in that way. So I've thought about it, and I thought about generally any form of reporting that is current, that is live, that is not based in fiction, you really cannot use AI for that right now, because AI is literally, basically, let me just use a layman term, it's in the cloud. It's not really in the physical world, and for it to be able to report something that is current. Even almost all models of AI right now cannot deal with current situations because they have to be trained on how to cope or how to adjust or how to process that information, if I should say that. So I feel like every form of information that is going to be current. So if you were reporting news, if you're reporting sports, ESPN basically, so entertainment, sports, any form of programming that is going to be live, or even events. So let's say fashion events, fashion shows, for example, or let's say like the Met Gala, that's another fashion event, or the Grammys, for example. So reporting live what happens there. I remember that BET happened just a few days back. The BET, I think it's the BET Awards. So things like that, the pictures from that, I don't feel those people will lose their jobs yet. And I don't feel maybe to even come as soon as we think it will come, because those people still have a valuable place to document, to write history. Political events, you have to still document that. Most presidents, governors, or politicians usually have people who document their journey in their term in office. So those people still have a place, and I do not see how AI would, at least in its current state, affect the kind of job that they do. So I think those people do not have as much to worry about as people who are in other fields, especially like in, say, fashion, because now I've seen instances of AI being able to compete, not favorably, but at least to an extent, with some of the things that some photographers might be able to create. However, because I thought about this sort of like side of AI and how it cannot really affect the jobs of people who are in live events, reporting, I also think it cannot really affect certain people. So it's just like maybe years ago, I remember that when I started photography, some people were still using film. At least the first time I ever picked up photography, I was reading and learning. I asked a number of people, and okay, how do you go about this? There were people who were predominantly shooting film, even though film was already dying at the time, and they were still predominantly shooting film. Now, let me say in the past 5 years, that died. And I mean, you probably wouldn't find anyone who still was shooting film. But still in the past 5 years, there's been a huge incline, at least in Nigeria where I live. There's been a very huge incline in the number of people who want to shoot film, who are shooting film, who prefer that nostalgic and, in quotes, authentic feel that film gives, that maybe other forms of like the digital medium would not give. And not that is a bad thing, but I'm just trying to use that to make a point that there would always be a space for people who do not follow that trend, for example, because there are people who would not need AI in what they're doing, or they would transcend the AI trend that is currently going on. And when I say transcend, is that AI cannot tell stories of what's happening right now. If I don't know, I just constantly go back to fashion because that's where I work currently. So in fashion, for example, if you have a designer trying to document their process and all that, I believe AI can help to do that. But if they want to really tell a story, they need someone who will tell their story in real time. Sometimes they need a filmmaker who's going to document all that process for them, who's going to do all that for them. And I think that's not the space where AI can take over yet. And to be very honest, maybe in the future, maybe in about 10 years, maybe AI will be that advanced to the point where it can take over that space. But right now, I don't see that happening. And I feel like for everyone who maybe worries about AI and thinks that, oh, maybe this thing's going to take over my job, maybe I should look for another field, or maybe I should look for another thing to do, I think you should just look at it as a tool. I currently use AI in everything that I do. I use OpenAI all the time. I use ChatGPT. I've used Midjourney to create mood boards. I've used AI a lot in my work. However, does it make my work better or easier? I think it makes it easier. Not maybe not better, but it makes my work easier. There are certain things I want to write. Maybe they're going to be long notes. I literally just have to write out the main points and say, okay, refine this or make this better. For example, with ChatGPT, and I've noticed that it writes it in a very concise way in a very short time. I've seen people who edit podcasts with AI, for example. I've seen people who create sort of backgrounds for their pictures with AI. So I feel like it makes your work better. And as a tool, I think we can lean into using it for what it can do to our work. However, there are certain things that it cannot do, and that's it cannot tell a genuine story. It might not be able to have certain perspective. For example, if I was to tell a story about how I see a certain situation, my perspective will be different from the next person's perspective. My perspective will be different from your perspective. And because of that, I feel like that perspective difference is what sometimes makes us unique. And even if AI develops a good perspective on its own to be able to tell stories, we might still be fascinated to how the human mind works to tell stories. And I feel like this is why, AI has its place, but it's not here to take anyone's job, especially when you know what you're doing and when you know, when you tell stories from a very human point of view. So that's just my opinion. I might be wrong. I might look back in a couple of years and think, oh, I was dead wrong in my assessment. But for now, I think that's at least from everything I've seen and from the past 7-8 months of being entrenched in the AI cycle and looking at how I can actually use it effectively in my own work. That's what I've noticed, that, okay, it can do these things. Maybe soon it will do that, but at least right now, I know it cannot do these things. So if you're in certain fields, maybe sports journalism, maybe current music journalism, like photojournalism in this case, or people that do paparazzi, or I don't think those people's jobs will still go away because people still love those things. People still want to see those things. If you shoot concerts, those things need documentation, and I think AI would get into those spaces eventually and would maybe become a tool to help people document their process, maybe even better. But I don't think it's yet at that stage where to take over their jobs. I would say generally I hold a very optimistic view about AI. And as much as I'm optimistic, I'm also conscious of the fact that it cannot take away the job of reporting live events. It can take the job of reporting current situation. It can't take the job of reporting current situations. It can't take the space of reporting real stories happening in real time. So that makes me even more optimistic about AI as a tool rather than seeing it as something that's going to take away the jobs of everybody. So that's my 2 cents and my ramble so far. I hope you sort of enjoyed this episode, and if you've made it to this point, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Or maybe not next week. I hope to make this podcast a bi-monthly thing. So 2 episodes every month. I don't want to spam, but I want to make sure that every episode has something valuable, be it a thought, be it a conversation, be it anything that's going to be valuable to anyone who's listening. If you're listening anywhere you're getting the podcast from, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and especially share with someone you think is going to enjoy this type of conversation. And hopefully you get to hear my voice again next week, and or when next you hear. And please, if you have the option to turn on notifications, please do that so that you'll be able to get this episode whenever it comes out, or the next episode whenever it comes out. So thank you very much, and stay creative.